Welcome, Impactful Parents. Today we have an impactful guest speaker, and his name is Ben Winter. Ben is a speaker, he is an author, and most importantly, he is also a dad. So, what Ben does is that he founded a success to improv business, and he has written a book that's called What to Expect When You're Having Expectations. But what I really brought Ben on here for was he has this concept called How to Stop Being Upset flowchart that we're going to talk about today. So thank you for being on today, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I want to go ahead and dive in and get started. Expectations, expectations. Oh my goodness. Talk about parenting being full of all of the expectations. And most of the time, parents don't even realize that they even have them. So, my first question to you is, would it be easier to just not have expectations at all and then just to go, if your expectations, most of them are going to go unmet. Like we kind of put our kids on a high pedestal sometimes, I think, in our brains. So, is it just better not to have them at all?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people will say I don't want to have expectations, so I don't have any, which is an expectation. So you're expecting not to have expectations, and then you're upset anyway. And the only reason anybody ever gets upset is because an expectation hasn't been met. And so when it comes to kids, we often forget like we haven't taught them that yet. So how can we have an expectation? It's like we're getting upset at something they didn't even know about, let alone have been taught about. And so you kind of have those expectations whether you want them or not because of how you grew up and how you were parented as a parent and how you see society working. So it's impossible not to have expectations. And kids are a great way to bring up those expectations you didn't even know you had.
They are. I think that from the minute that people find out that they're pregnant, there is bam, an expectation that just pops into their brain. It's going to be like this, it's going to happen like this, I'm going to go doing this, and they're going to end up like that. And then parenting is trying to, get them to live up to those expectations a lot of times. And then we get just disappointed when our kids don't, which is really, really unfortunate. So,
Yeah.
do you have anything to say about like how can parents not do that to ourselves? It's like it's so frustrating.
Yeah, there's an interesting way, like as a parent myself, I've come across times where I've like wanted to tell my son, like, don't do that. And then I have to question myself, why am I saying don't do that? Is there really a problem here? But that's how I grew up. And it's like, well, there isn't a problem there. And so it's I actually enjoy getting upset because it's a great opportunity to check in with myself and my expectations. And so they're great for that reason because yeah, we tend to like yell really quick and react, but at the same time we can also come back around and say, you know what, I had some time to think about what I said and what you were doing, and it's totally cool, and let's have a conversation. And it's okay to have conversations with kids, just don't make them too difficult, I guess.
And I love what you said there is that, you're saying, oops, wait a second, I made a mistake, really, is what you're saying. I had an expectation. I was not really right in that matter. Let me correct that. And you're starting that conversation with your child. And I think that a mistake that a lot of parents make is they don't realize that they can have those conversations even with a very, very young child of, age 4, age 5, age 6. Those are fine ages to start having these conversations of, geez, I wanted this and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have expected that from you. And starting to say, look, I'm human. I'm a parent too. I'm just a human and I made a mistake. Now, how can we fix it together?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I
if you
love that.
haven't if you haven't noticed this world, especially this country, nobody wants to be wrong, and we've kind of taught people not to be wrong. Instead, if we can take that step back and say, I was wrong, then you're showing your child it's okay. I was wrong. I had this expectation because that's how I was raised, but different time, different situation, and you're not going to kill yourself. So does it really matter? And
Yeah, because safety is really the primary concern. And after that, it's kind of just, like you said, our expectations and what we want to get out of things. So,
yeah, I
oh,
mean,
yes.
what's wrong with having a kid express like every possible sound they can make? I mean, there's people out there making millions of dollars a year doing sound effects with their voice. Yeah, it's annoying at times, and that's where you have a conversation of there's a time and place for it. I don't want you to stop, but I don't want you to do it 24 hours a day.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's all the expectations. It's like I need peace and quiet. That's my expectation. Just calm down.
I think that a lot of times as parents too, we don't tell our kids our expectations. We just assume that they know. And that's another common error.
Yeah, and I think that's why I like the whole part about getting upset is it's that check-in point. Did I even know I had this expectation? Because if I didn't know I had this expectation, I couldn't have possibly communicated it. And if I didn't communicate the expectation, then they can't live up to it. So I'm the one at fault. And so I need to take that step back and now communicate it.
I love the role modeling that you're encouraging here. It's just awesome. And what could I do on a daily basis then? You have this knowledge of this book. So the book is called, let me preface this to the audience. The book is called What to Expect When Having Expectations. So what can I do on a daily basis to practice this exploration of my own expectations?
Yeah. So I talked about the flow chart there a second. On my website, havingexpectations.com, there's a free download for the expectations workflow. I've given it to a bunch of people. They put it on their refrigerator. And if nothing else, it's a little quick reminder that when I get upset, there's something else I can do than just lash out or scream or, get further upset. I can take that step back and say, this is that time where I can reflect and do something different. And eventually you get to the point where it's like, did I even know I had this expectation? And just like any other personal growth, any other training that we do, it's called practice. And this is a great way to do practice on stopping yourself when you're upset and doing something a little bit different. So I just say download that, print it out, throw it on your fridge, and that'll remind you every day that there's an alternative to just screaming and yelling.
Can you go through it a little bit for the audience to kind of see what they would be looking at, what so they can go find it and then download it?
Yeah. So um I'll show this a little bit here. The first step on there is you're upset. And so like I said, that's your trigger. That's when you say, okay, I'm upset. Let me take a step back. And the first little thing right there is, did you know you had the expectation? And I'm going to say 90% of the time, most people didn't even know they had the expectation. And so it kind of guides you from there as to, um, first you have to explore. Like the moment that you realize that you didn't even know you had the expectation is the first moment when you can stop being upset. Because you're like, well, if I didn't know, nobody else knew. So let me look at this. Now this might be where I had that expectation because that's how my parents parented me. But now, do I want to parent the same way? Because how many times in my life did I say, I'm not going to be like my parents? Right? We don't want to be
Right.
like our parents, but we end up being like our parents. So it's that first opportunity to say, am I going to do what my parents did, or am I going to choose something different? And it's a conscious decision at that point. And so you kind of keep going through it. Ultimately, at the end of all of these different steps, it comes back to communication, something that we've kind of lost as a people. We like to share information, but we don't like to communicate. And so, whether we're communicating with ourselves, our spouse, or our children, it's all important when it comes to expectations.
So just to clarify, I'm going to get upset with my child. And the first step you're saying is, okay, stop, pause for a moment and ask, why am I upset? And most of the time that's going to refer to an expectation not being met. Is that correct?
Right. And that's where you stop and say, did I know I had this expectation?
And then yes, do I
Yeah.
know I had it? Like, did I know that I needed my child to be ready by 6 o'clock so that we could get out the door?
Right.
Um,
And on those occasions when you did know you had the expectation, then it becomes a question of, did I communicate it? Did
right.
they agree to it? Did they buy into it? Did we negotiate it all? Did we come to a conclusion that works together? Do they know the consequences of agreeing to it and not following through. You know, there's a lot of things that are involved when it comes to negotiating something, because my expectation might be different than your expectation, in which case we need to negotiate on what ultimately we're going to agree upon. Because if we don't, then we're in this that battle where nothing's going to get done, because
Mhm.
I want it my way. I want it my way. You know, so there's
Yes,
got to be
I feel like
communication.
so much of our expectations not only come from our past and things like that, but and when it comes to our children, we assume that they know our expectations. And then sometimes when they do know it, let's say they do, there was never a conversation about what those consequences might be if you're not living up to what I'm expecting of you. Being ready by 6 o'clock so that we could get out the door, for example, for our school age parents. Did my child know that I needed that from them? Yes, they knew that. Okay, so then do they know that there's a consequence for not living up to that expectation? Do they realize that being late is going to cause this domino effect of certain things that might happen? And then
Yeah,
starting that conversation and making sure that everything is really clear. I feel like there's so much mud, like muddling in not only our communication, because we just assume so much
yeah,
that from other people, like they just know or they understand that there's a consequence. And yet it's really never said out loud. It's never really spoken. And so it's not clear. It's
right.
very
And we
muddy.
have to remind ourselves in this whole process that our kids are blank canvases. We are the ones responsible for teaching them. If we don't teach them the consequence, if we don't show them what happens, if they don't experience it, they're going to learn from somebody we don't want them to learn from. And so, again, being upset, what responsibility did I have in them not being ready at 6 o'clock? Did I need to start my day a little bit earlier to make sure? Um, you know, did I have the conversation of consequences? And kids don't necessarily have a good concept of time. They're so good at living in the now that they don't think about the 4 steps ahead that you just thought about. And
And not to their
it's
fault, like I want
yeah,
to tell the audience, like literally their brain cannot actually develop it yet until they're much older. So I think it's like 24, 26 that it's fully developed.
26. Okay.
It's crazy old. Yeah.
Makes sense, actually. It explains a lot of people in college.
Yes, it does. So, and you know what I love about this concept that you're bringing up, Ben, is I teach a lot of this in my behavior management program that helps kids with big emotions, because a lot of those emotions come from their expectations not being met. And so I'm going to flip this around and say that not only can we use this as parents to understand why we're upset and why we're not communicating correctly and to communicate better with our kids, but to also have our children understand why they're upset, because so much of why they might be having a bad day is because an expectation was not met for them, and getting them to explore that and say, okay, why are you angry? What was the expectation not being met? How can you communicate better to your whatever friend that disappointed you, or your teacher that didn't understand what you were talking about, or whoever, so much can just be applied to all of this. And just like you said, again, I want to reiterate to the audience, it is so important that we are teaching this to our children, because otherwise who will?
Exactly. I think you hit it right on the head.
Well,
Goes
you
both
did,
ways.
you said it first. So
Well,
I
you're
just have to say it again because I think it's brilliant. It
I
is.
like it.
So much sometimes it's just like you got to hear it. I think there's actually even science behind that too. You have to hear things so many times before they start to get ingrained inside of you, and it's just a great concept to keep reiterating over and over until we can get it, because we are just so hard-headed, me included.
Yeah. I Expectations are everywhere. They happen every day, all the time, and we get upset when they don't happen. And like any practice, it takes time, and the more you do it, the more you come right back to, okay, I'm upset, I can do something else. And that's all it takes. And you do that enough, and you find somebody who's really at peace with their life and the world around them, because they know they play their part, they take the responsibility that they need to take, and they move on.
Yes. I love this taking responsibility part too that you just said. Instead of the blame, we blame people so easily. I'm so
Right?
unhappy because you something,
Yeah,
but
like
really,
rather than what did I do or not do to do that for my child, my spouse, whoever.
yes.
It's like, no, you have your part to play and
Why
absolutely
did I
hold it.
expect that from you and now I'm let down?
Yeah,
So that's where we have to come from instead of why did you do that? No, why did I have that expectation to begin with?
right.
Um,
Who taught me that one, and
yes.
does it work for me? Because if it doesn't, then I can unteach myself or learn something new.
I think a lot of this concept that you're talking about today is also rooted in that fact of we can only control ourselves. Like we can't change other people, we can't control what other people do or think or say. So we have to really focus on ourselves because that's the only person that we have control of. And if we can figure that out and really investigate it, then it's just a lot easier to come at peace to most of our life and all that
Yeah.
disappointment.
And I'm sure you've said this on your program. I'm positive you have. If you haven't, you got to do a whole show on it. But kids learn from watching,
Mhm.
not from the words coming out of your mouth. They learn from watching. If you show yourself as training yourself to do something different, to take responsibility, guess what? You're going to have a kid that takes responsibility. That's just how it works. And this is one easy way to take responsibility for what's going on around yourself so that your kids see, oh, when I'm upset at my friend for taking the ball from me, I can do something different about it. Now, they might not get it right away, but they're going to get it. If that makes
Repetition,
sense.
practice, that's everything.
Yes.
I love it. So tell us, how can our audience find you if they want to find out more and learn more from you?
So the easiest way is to go to havingexpectations.com. And from there, you can download the flow chart, print it up, put it on your fridge, mirrors, whatever, and learn all about everything else going on.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here on The Impactful Parent today. You have a lot to contribute, and I appreciate this conversation.
Likewise.
All right. Thank you, parents. You got this. We're just here to help.